All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is 10:54 p.m. on September 30th, and I want to announce that Oklahoma still sucks.
It is. You heard it right there, ladies and gentlemen. All in Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and it is officially OU week, and we are so excited. We've got a lot of things already in the works. We know we've got 2 weeks of content basically to cover Texas, OU. We could probably spend a month on it. And so we've got a little bit of a crazy episode today. We're going to give us some clear-headed thoughts, not an immediate reaction thought on the Mississippi State game, but a couple days have passed. We are now going to give a clear and level-headed opinion on the Texas-Mississippi State game. Texas, number 2 in the country now. We're going to give our thoughts on that. Jake is going to give a soapbox rant, all-time rant on a topic he is very passionate about. And then also we will get into the start of our discussion over the next 2 weeks of Texas OU. The official first line of the game has come out, and we will discuss what that line looks like and if we are willing to bet it, and some fun facts behind that line as to any bettors out there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and let's give our Texas-Mississippi State clear-headed thoughts. Jake, I'll let you take the lead there, and then I'll chime in afterwards.
Yeah, so, I think on these second watch throughs of a game where Texas ultimately wins by 3 possessions plus, always look a lot better than it did live. You kind of realize on second watch through 2 or 3 of the holding calls were complete bogus. And that makes me honestly just not worried as much about things like that. The pre-snap stuff is my main concern as far as penalties, but I talked about the first drive over and over on Saturday, or the first half of drives over and over on Saturday. So go back and listen if you want to hear me talk about the first half way too much. But I went back and I kind of looked at that second half because I was curious. And I thought the offense, in the first half should have scored on 4 or 5 possessions easily. In the second half, they essentially had 5 possessions. They kneeled it out on the 6. And they had 3 touchdowns on 5 of those drives. They had a field goal that Sarkisian took off of the scoreboard as one of those drives where they then turned it over on the only bad throw Arch had all day, which Sarkisian actually said after the game. We didn't know this yet on Saturday, but he said, I want to know who the coach is for the Texas Longhorns because he took off 3 points for his teams today. And I think he called himself an idiot or something like that. Yeah. And then the first drive was a fumble. So they essentially scored on 4 of the 5 drives in the second half. So as sloppy as that game felt, Texas really dominated it. And a lot of people who are in the college football Twitter world or X or whatever you want to call it, I'm sure you all see this chart that comes out every week, and it takes the expected yards per attempt, I believe. And there's a couple different that come out, and it shows how bad did your team really get beat or how bad did you beat your team. Mm-hmm. Texas was like the 4th biggest blowout based off the actual advanced metrics of the game because Texas did dominate the entire box score. Now, that said, Texas outgained Oklahoma last year and lost that football game because of miscues and things that we did see against Mississippi State, such as turnovers. And that is something that's going to have to get cleaned up. But really defensively as well, I thought they looked a lot better. After that first drive, Mississippi State was right around 4 to 3.9 yards per carry on the actual running backs if you take away the sacks. So they really weren't getting that much yards running the ball. It just felt like it at times because they've set such a high standard last year with the rush defense and then this year to start things off.
And do you think that that is partially some of our frustration as fans that we saw Saturdays because we've seen this team have those mistakes, have those penalties, and shoot yourself in the foot with turnovers early in a game against an Oklahoma, and it has costed you in a game? And maybe not necessarily that Texas fans, you and I had any doubt that Texas was going to win that Mississippi State game. You and I, we mentioned it on Saturday during our immediate reaction show that there was at no point in the game where I was actually worried or panicked that Texas was going to lose that game. There wasn't a point in the game where I felt that way. However, I think some of the frustration stemmed from there was a little bit of PTSD from last season's team, especially against OU, and then especially knowing who our opponent is coming up next week.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of the frustration comes from that. But let me ask you this. When is the last time, especially under Sarkisian, forget about the first year, that was a wash. But when's the last time you've seen a team under him, even in the 8-win season, do that twice in a row? When's the last time you saw Anthony Hill have 2 awful games in a row? Never in his career. Saturday, even though I saw PFF had him graded as the highest linebacker of the week, he had 4 missed tackles. He misread the gaps a few times, or not even necessarily misread, just kind of overran it or didn't pursue correctly.
That was my
I actually
thing with
thought
Anthony
it was
Hill.
one of his worst games at Texas.
That was one of my, and that's probably where that tweet came from. Earlier on Monday, there was a tweet. I want to go back and see who it actually came from. I can't remember the Twitter handle. If you can find the Twitter handle while I'm having this discussion, then we'll mention it. But he gave A&M fans some defensive game notes based on the Texas Mississippi State game, and put attack number 0. He's by far their worst defender. And if you're just watching Mississippi State, yeah, you probably saw glimpses of a Jalen Smith running around out there. If you're a Cowboy fan, just running around with his head cut off and over pursuing. I think that was what it was for me. And I think I mentioned that to you via text on Saturday during the game, was that I don't know what it is about Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill this game. It seems like they're over pursuing, and they're just like, they're almost attacking too far, too hard at one point in time, and they're not staying under control and just playing patiently, letting the offense kind of come to them. I know they're trying to be the aggressor. I know they're trying to make a big play, but that was kind of the feeling that I got from Anthony Hill as well. So your eyes are kind of seeing what my eyes are seeing. When it comes to the game overall, I'm looking back on it and I feel really good. And I did mention this a little bit Saturday, but I feel really good knowing that Texas won 35-13, and it was by far the worst performance that we've seen from Texas, even dating, mid-season to last year. I would say maybe the K-State game, but that was even with Quinn out. That was with a backup quarterback. So maybe Oklahoma. When was the last time
that was a ranked opponent,
right? So Houston,
the TCU game,
TCU. Okay, TCU makes more sense. Yeah,
I know they had issues with TCU for a long time, but that TCU team last year was dreadful, and Texas had no business with that game being so close. Yeah. I mean, TCU couldn't stop anyone, and Texas couldn't score. But they did lose Brooks that game. But I did find the Twitter account, by the way. Okay. If everyone wants to go on to X and shout out to Gabe Ickard, I'm just saying it would be a shame if everyone tagged Anthony Hill. It'd be a real shame if Texas had a whole lot of bulletin board material from some OU people. I'd really hate to see that.
Speaking of bulletin material, Colin Simmons had a chance to speak with some media people, and he said going into his first Texas OU game, he said he feels very confident. He likes the team, and he goes, I think we're going to dominate Oklahoma. And then I think he kind of realized what he said, and then he kind of took a step back and stumbled over some of his words a little bit and was like, crap, I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. But then he stuck with it. I mean, it's not like he went back and said it. He goes, no, yeah, I just like our matchups. I think we're really good, just kind of praising his teammates and stuff like that. But he did say, I do think we're going to dominate, end quote.
Yeah, he shouldn't have said that. That's his biggest freshman mistake of the year, by far. Because he's been so tremendous on the field. He was bound to make a mistake somewhere. And I'm sure Sarkisian had a little talk with them of, let's not give the other team bulletin board anytime, but especially when it's OU, because we all know how this game works. And we're going to go over some crazy stats about the history of this game and when a team is a big favorite. But it doesn't typically work out well for the favorite. It pretty much always ends up being a much closer game than people expect. I think probably 8 out of the last 10 years, just off the top of my head, have been 1-score games.
Yeah, aside from 49-0. So let's go ahead and get into some of the big news that dropped following the Texas Mississippi State game. Obviously, Texas wins handedly. Before we get into this, I know Texas drops to number 2. Bama beats Georgia. They jump Texas as that number 1 spot. Georgia falls back to number 5. And so, Jake, just real quickly, put a bow, close the chapter that is Texas, Mississippi State. Not as bad as we initially thought, or still some glaring concerns. What was your overall clear-headed takeaway?
Not too concerned on the offense. I mean, I don't think Jaden Blue's going to have 2 fumbles again. I almost glad to see the performance on the offense, because now they have a lot to work on and they're going to come out very motivated. And same for some individuals on the defensive side, like Anthony Hill, probably one of his, even with the high grade, I think one of his worst games is Longhorn. But the last thing I'll say is I do hope the defensive game plan was vanilla, because it was very plain. They kind of ran the same way they did against the run and shoot last year, but even more base, I thought, throughout the game. And I think they were hiding some stuff, because OU still runs a similar style offense. I know Jeff Levy's gone, but it's still a similar style of offense. And so I think we're going to see a lot of different packages and a lot of different blitz looks and things against OU, or at least we better, or I'll be pretty disappointed.
All right, Jake, Alabama beats Georgia in one of the most insane college football. Can I just preface this by saying I love college football, and anybody who can just blatantly just go out there and say that the NFL is so much better than college football is just not watching. They just have no feeling. They have no emotion. They have no heart in it, because Bama, Georgia, that is everything we want in college football. And I know we haven't even touched on it yet, and we're going to later on this week, just in terms of a college football landscape. We might not get into it, but even Miami, Virginia Tech, the way that game ended and the controversy and the craziness of that game, and it kind of goes into kind of what you're going to get into later on in the show. I don't want to give that fully away, but just how every game is so important and how much it means so much to these players, to these teams, to these programs, to these fans, regardless of the end of season implications. Alabama, Georgia was freaking awesome, dude. What a game.
The funny thing is, if you would have said it was going to be a great game after the first half, I think most people laughed at you, because it was 30-7. Bama was rolling, and then all of a sudden Georgia comes right back, and they end up getting a 1-play drive to take the lead all of a sudden late in the 4th. And you're thinking, wow, this is one of the most epic. I think it would have been the biggest comeback in the history of college football in a top 5 matchup, which is significant, because college football's been around for a long time.
And there's been a lot of
crazy comebacks.
Yeah.
And,
Not to mention in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, not to mention in Tuscaloosa.
Really by Georgia just throwing up hero balls every single possession. They weren't doing anything fancy. They were running fades and saying, F it, somebody's down there, and launching it. That was
someone
the whole
was.
Offense.
And someone was down there. And
someone was. And the young Alabama secondary got a little bit exposed in that second half, because there was nothing fancy about what Georgia was doing in that second half. But then they take the lead. And then Alabama's looked bad on offense the whole half. And you think Georgia has maybe won it, or at least it's going to be tough. And then one play by a 7, and believe it or not, Tanner, did you know he's only 17 years old?
What?
I had no idea. I don't know why the broadcast doesn't talk about it.
Dude, the media has missed out on a huge storyline here, folks. The national media not mentioning that Ryan Williams is 17 years old as going under the radar is absurd to me.
And to be fair, I get why they say it so much, because he's one of the best looking freshmen I've ever seen play college football.
Like his looks or his play?
No, his play on the field. He is, I mean, the speed and the moves he has in it. I mean, it makes Xavier Worthy look not shifty. That's how scary it is when he has the ball, and his body control. It's crazy. Smooth. That last play, that's like a Matrix move times 2.
Yeah, the fact that the fact that college football 25 had to nerf the spin move, and then he goes out in real life and does a double spin move on Georgia to win the game. They almost need to go back to the old original version that came out of college football, where Judkins people were just abusing the spin button. They were just spinning all the way down the field. That's almost what he did. I mean, no, you're right though. Ryan Williams is a stud, and the dude is just such a smooth route runner. And he's smooth with the ball in his hands, and he's just shifty and quick and decisive, and he's hard to get a good hit on. Like, people are like, well, he's so small, just hit him. Good luck. Good luck trying to hit him. I mean, you can try, but he's not going to let you. I was so impressed. And Jalen Milroe, I just need to touch on the quality of play from last year. This time last year, they benched him. The fans were calling to bench him, and so Saban did bench him last year at USF. They nearly lose that game. He comes in the following week and he starts Milroe. Milroe is the starter for the remainder of the season, leads them to the playoffs, leads them to an SEC victory, and wins the conference, goes to the playoffs, nearly beats the eventual national champs after being taken to overtime. And then he comes back this year. And the way that he's playing this year, he's probably a Heisman finalist. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So his maturation and his production and his development from one year to the next has been incredible. And he just has a superstar wide receiver as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm okay with Alabama being the number one team in the country. Shoot me.
Yeah. They earned it. I mean, I expected it. And if I was an AP voter, I would have voted it, quite frankly. Some people were like, well, they blew a big lead at home, so they're not well, they beat Georgia. Yes,
they lost the lead to Georgia. They didn't lose the lead to Kentucky.
They brought it right back, and all that matters is a win. If they would have won that game and it was close all the way through and it's the same score, people would have been saying Alabama should be number one as well, and that is the correct answer.
Or if Alabama just blows them out and they don't come back, and they would still be the number one team. And any way you look at it, Alabama's the number one team in the country, and I'm okay with it, quite frankly.
And if the Heisman was awarded today, it would go to Milroe. I'm not saying that's the right choice. I would probably pick Travis Hunter, but the way the Heisman works, we both know it'd be Milroe. Milroe is the odds-on favorite as of today. Right after that game, he went to the highest odds to win the Heisman. And to anyone that keeps up with what Kalen DeBoer has done as a head coach, this isn't surprising. He wins everywhere he goes. That's all he does is win. I think his record in the Power 5 is like 60-4, if I recall correctly, or maybe 61-4 now. Everywhere he has gone, he has won consistently. And at every level of college, essentially, because he's truly worked his way up. We talked a few weeks about who would you take over Sarkisian to lead the Texas program, and I kind of said not really anybody. DeBoer might be the one guy.
DeBoer is 108-12.
And this is his first stop at a dominant program.
And in his career. You know where he wanted you want to know where he coached before here in terms of FBS Division I football? Fresno State, Indiana. Fresno State as a positions coach, offensive coordinator, went to Indiana, came back as a head coach. Fresno State in 2020. Washington in 2022, and now at Alabama. The dude overall as a head coach is 108-12, ladies and gentlemen. The dude, Alabama's not going anywhere. Anyone who thought that they were going to have this big drop off after Saban, and you were one of the first ones to tell me, because I said, maybe some transfers are going to fall. Some transfers fell. Alabama kept the recruiting class with Kalen DeBoer. They had a couple transfers, but really their recruiting class is intact. Their transfers didn't completely deplete the team. Milroe decided to stay. You get guys like Ryan Williams stepping up. I mean, this Alabama team isn't going anywhere. If anything, they're going to be just as good as they were with Saban, or maybe could they possibly offensively at least be better than the years that they had at Saban?
Offensively, just consistency wise, they're going to be, just because that is what DeBoer does, is the offensive side of the ball. Saban had to go through offensive coordinators. They had certain, like Sarkisian was probably the peak of Alabama offense. And now you have DeBoer coming in, and it's going to be very similar to when Steve Sarkisian was there, because DeBoer and Sarkisian are probably the top two minds in college football. And as far as the offensive side of things goes, and you'd probably have to give the nod to DeBoer, considering he's 2-0 against Sarkisian in the last 2 years. But I mean, why would you want to transfer from Alabama? You're at Alabama. We saw that environment. It was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
NIL there is very strong, especially for football, obviously. And then you have a guy who's coming in, who's won everywhere he's gone, runs one of the most explosive and exciting to watch offenses in all of football. And he took Washington to a national title. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you want to play for the guy?
Yeah. No, I'm with you, Jake. And so, long story short, I think Bama not only is am I okay with Bama being number one? I think they fully deserve being the number one team in the country. And like I said a few weeks ago, when Texas was awarded the number one team or given the number one team in the country title by the AP poll, which the AP poll, what does it really matter? Going after 10 weeks, we stopped following the AP poll. We don't even follow the AP poll going into the postseason. So really, what does their ranking really affect? It's just to keep track of teams weeks 1 through 7 or 1 through 8 whenever we start going into the college football polls. That's really all it's there for. And it's for the media. It's for College Game Day to say, oh, we've got number 5 versus number 4. Ladies and gentlemen, we would still be watching Michigan, Ohio State, regardless of what their rankings are. We're still going to be watching Texas OU, regardless of what their rankings are. So my point being, Alabama, Georgia, the country's still going to tune into those games, regardless of what the rankings of those two teams are. So I said it a few weeks ago. Texas's goal was not to be ranked number 1 by week 3 of the regular season. Texas's goal was not to be ranked number 1 going into OU. Texas's goal is to be ranked number 1 at the end of the season, and that's really all that matters. They want to be the last team after the national championship, holding up that trophy, being ranked and being known as the number 1 team in the country. They could care less what happens weeks 3 through 10. They just need to win football games, get to the playoffs, and win the big thing and take it home. That's the only thing that's on their mind. They care less about a ranking in the middle of the season. So, Jake, speaking of OU, let's go ahead and move forward. Texas is 14.5-point favorites to open versus OU. You texted me this in the middle of the day. I said, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
No, I already, just as a rule of life, and, I like to sprinkle, some money here and there on some games. It's legal where I am, so I have all the sports books, but I never, ever, I'll bet Texas games. I never bet the Red River game. Never. It is just the most unpredictable game. And you can sit there and say OU's kind of dominated over the last 17 years. But as far as the spread goes, no, it's pretty even spread wise. And this game just is always close. It feels like it's always one possession. Very rarely do you have those 49-0. And that's typically because there's injuries or a new coach or something along those lines. And as of right now, I don't see this year being that differently. This Oklahoma team is not awful. They have a very good defense. They're getting better on offense with a young quarterback that's fast, and Texas is going to have to game plan specifically for. This is not going to be a cakewalk. I don't expect Texas to go in and have 49-0 again. I don't see that happening in this game again for some time.
It is the first time Texas has been over a touchdown favorite since 2005. That was a good year, right? Won 45-12 as 2 touchdown favorites against Oklahoma. That was the last time Texas was favored by that many scores. So it did work out. However, OU has been a 2-possession favorite 7 times, and they covered 1 time. They've lost 2 of those games outright. It goes to show you Texas OU is a crapshoot. There's no formula. There's no algorithm. There's no analytic that's going to tell you how to bet this game, because it's up in the air. No one expected OU to win last year. They took it to Texas and they won the game. Texas even outplayed them, had them in yards, and almost every statistical category, Texas won that game except for on the scoreboard. This game doesn't always matter. Sam Ehlinger, when was the last time a class went through Oklahoma or through Texas and didn't win a Red River game? That's an interesting stat. That's something that I wouldn't mind.
I would have to go through and look at it to say exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's been some time, because even Charlie Strong, had some wins. Herman obviously had some wins. Sarkisian's obviously had the one big win, and
so there's not been a stretch where a 4-year span where a recruiting class for Texas or OU has gone and didn't win a Red River game.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Right. Not since before Mac Brown. I can tell you that much. So
the longest win streak by Texas was 8 from 1940 to 1947. The longest win streak for Oklahoma is 6 from 1952 to 1957. Unfortunately, this isn't pulling it up by the year, but that gives you a pretty good idea considering how long ago those were, and those aren't that long of win streaks really.
No.
That it more than likely hasn't happened at least anytime recently, anytime that we've been alive.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's all. That was really the point that I wanted to make. And lastly, if you want to bet this game, maybe bet OU on the spread, or just don't do it, But
if I had a gun to my head and you said you had to put money down, I would bet OU to cover this. 14.5 is crazy. You're saying essentially they're going to win by 3 possessions. I realize it's only 2, but you're saying they're going to win by more than 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That very well could happen. If Texas plays their A game, that very well could happen. But I expect OU to bring their A game, and even if Texas brings their A game, it's still going to be a tough game. That is just how the Red River is. It is the most spectacular rivalry game to watch in college football. I don't even want to hear the Ohio State. It is a split field every time. It is home field advantage for both teams. It is the flukiest game I've ever seen. And we both said it going into last year. Neither you or I were that confident. We're like, this game's fluky. I'm not as confident as all these other Texas fans.
Yep.
And then sure enough, Texas went in and lost. I don't feel as nervous as I did last year, but I still feel very nervous just because I know how this game is. I know Texas is going to fight adversity, and they're going to have to play cleaner than they did just this last week.
Yep, you're exactly right. All right, Jake, the floor is yours. We're introducing a new segment, and it's called Don't Jump, Jake.
I like the name because sometimes I feel like it whenever I see some of the dumbest takes ever on X. And one includes, and some of you listening may have this take, and I'm sorry, but I think it's a dumb take. I'm not saying you're dumb. I'm saying you have a dumb belief with this take, which is that because of the 12-team playoff, not every game is as important. I don't understand how that's true considering in the old system, and especially before the 14 playoff, if a team lost one game, then according to your standard that playing for a national title is all that matters, then no games mattered for any team after they lost a game. And teams don't stay undefeated that long. So with a 12-team playoff, more games matter. I care about UNLV. I care about Boise State. I care about Liberty, seeing what these teams are doing. And then Ole Miss, they just lost to Kentucky. Their season would be over probably even last year. It would definitely be over before the 14 playoff took place. Their season still matters. Again, this is all if you think the only thing that matters is playing for a national title. Ole Miss can still play for a national title at the end of the year, even with that ugly loss to Kentucky. Georgia certainly can still play for a national title. Obviously, they can still win the conference, but even if Georgia loses to Texas with their schedule, they would get in easily with 2 losses. So it actually just objectively makes more games important because you have 12 teams at the end of the year that are going to fight to win the national championship. So more games are going to matter because you got to try to get into that 12-team playoff. And now you can if you have 2 losses. If you lose a game early in the season, it doesn't mean your season's over. So if you think that games are not important because they made the playoffs more, stop, look in the mirror, and go, you're dumb for this take. And then revisit it and think about what I just said and realize that now all games are even more important. And tell me, if you watched Alabama, Georgia, tell me both those teams did not think that game was extremely important. Tell me that the fans didn't think that game was very important.
Those states,
you saw the
Alabama,
game
Georgia. Yeah, they both care. Those states cared about those games, like the governors and politicians and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters all care about that game. I mean, that game is a huge game. Regionally, it's a huge game, not just in terms of a national championship hopes or your conference championship or your regular season or whatever. Literally, family traditions are built and memories are made with these families on who wins those types of games. I mean, Texas OU, I haven't missed a game sitting there watching it with my family and I don't know how long. I mean, last year we had a baby shower. The only thing that was on and people were paying attention to was Texas OU. We didn't care about what gender the baby was. It was Texas OU. Okay, then we can get to the baby reveal gender thingy. Okay, that was secondary. These games matter regardless of if you think a 12-team playoff waters down the regular season or not. It just it doesn't, because like you said, Jake,
It
I
fills
can't.
the glass.
If anything, it makes these games matter even more going into the regular season, because now you've got an Ole Miss with one loss. You could have a Missouri with a loss or two, but hey, wait, Alabama dropped a game. Wait, now Georgia dropped a game. Now you've got teams that are 2 loss, 1 loss, and now they're kind of competing all for maybe one of those last secondary spots in that first round instead of a conference championship game. And you've got that not only within the SEC, but you've got it in the ACC, you've got it in the Big 12, you've got it in the Big 10, you've got it everywhere. And then maybe you've got 3 undefeated G5 teams. What happens when you've got 3 or 4 G5 teams that are undefeated or are pushing for a conference championship in their respective division that get an automatic bid? All eyes are going to be glued to those games. You better believe it. UNLV is a fun team to watch despite their quarterback sitting out.
Yeah, I mean, their new quarterback was one of the highest graded quarterbacks in all of college football last week. And the last thing I'll say on this, because I could rant till I kind of did rant till I was red in the face, but I had to stop and breathe for a second. But is if you have that take, you're either a cranky old man, or you really don't love college football as much as you think you do, or you're both. That's the last thing I'll say. I truly think that, because if you didn't have fun sitting down and watching Georgia, Alabama, especially that second half, I just don't think you love football that much.
Last thing I want to talk about, Jake, great rant. Loved it. We'll bring that back every week, so get ready. Texas dominates Texas A&M over the weekend. Volleyball starts 2-0 in SEC play, beating Texas A&M in the conference opener 3-1 on Friday. We didn't get to touch on it on Saturday because obviously we were consumed with Texas, Mississippi State. And then on Sunday, they turn it around and sweep LSU. And then on top of the Texas A&M beatdown that the volleyball girls brought down to them, Texas women's soccer beat A&M 2-0 with Ashlyn Miller as the player of the game with a goal in the first half at the 27th minute to kind of establish the dominance. But yeah, a shutout in soccer, beat them 3-1 over to start SEC play, and then also turned around and beat LSU 3-0 on Sunday. So volleyball looks to be back on track. They are going to be one of the top teams in the SEC. We'll continue to give you updates as that goes on. But Jake, you have a comment real quick?
Yeah. Just on the volleyball, that was the highest attended game in A&M volleyball history.
Yes.
A lot of sad Colt members were leaving that game. And the final thing is, how dumb was A&M to agree to have a trophy that gets presented at the end of the athletic season for whichever team wins in the most sports? They are never going to win that trophy. You know what? There'll be a longer time until they win that trophy than their last national title in football.
With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we release these episodes Tuesday through Friday at noon every single day on YouTube and where all podcasts can be listened to. On Saturday, we will release the episode immediately following the Texas game. Whenever that game is, or whenever that game is over, we will release an immediate reaction game episode following that one. So stay tuned, put your alerts on, like, share, subscribe. $2.99 last time I checked. We wanted 300 before the OU game. We are going to get well over 300. Can we push 400? 500 even before OU? Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have guest fulfill not only this week, but also going next week as well. We might even jump behind enemy lines and talk to a couple of Oklahoma people as well. We're going to give you all the content leading up to Texas OU. We get one of these every single year. We only get Red River Rivalry one time a year, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to take full advantage of it with 2 weeks leading up to the game. For Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.